So glad to see you all tonight. We are studying in Genesis, and we had looked at the 11th chapter, begun the 11th chapter, the scattering of the people, the story of Babel. And then we had gotten into the last section in chapter 11, which narrows down our focus considerably to the story of one family, the history, the generations of Shem, Arphaxad, Shelah, Eber, Peleg, Reu, Serug, Nahor, and Terah. One thing you notice as we try to look at the numbers and make the comparisons, it's interesting how that if we've got the numbers right, Shem would have outlived Terah. We don't sometimes think of that because the Lord sort of shows the place of an individual in history and then moves on to the next generation, but that doesn't mean that those generations all had died out, whether how close they were, what associations they had. I don't know anything about that, but I just think it's fascinating. During this early period, when men lived so long, generations would overlap considerably. But when you come to the story of Terah, if you have your Bible open, Genesis chapter 11, and beginning in verse 26, and Terah lived 70 years and begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Now these are the generations of Terah. Terah begat Abram, Nahor, Haran begat, and Haran begat Lot. Haran died before his father Terah in the land of his nativity in Ur of the Chaldees. And Abraham and Nahor took them wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, the father of Iscah. But Sarai was barren. She had no child. And Terah took Abram, his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his son's son, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth with them, and they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan. And they came unto Haran and dwelt there. And the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. We know the family of Terah. It's a famous family, and it's going to be, again, the focus of our attention as we think about all the stories concerning Isaac, concerning Lot, concerning Ishmael. All of this is the larger family of Terah. If we read Genesis 12 and that's all we knew, it almost sounds as if it was Terah's idea to leave Ur. But actually, as we read the story further, for example, references like, it's Genesis 15. It makes the point that God called Abram in Ur. But we also remember how that the religious background of Ur and the family in that place was problematic. Joshua, in Joshua 24, talks about that. Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem and summoned the elders, the heads, the judges, the officers of Israel, and they presented themselves before God. And this is many years later, of course, during the time of during the time of the conquest of the land. Joshua said to the people, "Thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, long ago your fathers lived beyond the Euphrates, Terah, the father of Abraham, of Nahor, and they served other gods. And then I took your father Abraham from beyond the river and led him through all the land of Canaan and made his offspring many. I gave him Isaac," and so on. Later on in that same chapter, "Now therefore," he challenges the generation of Joshua's day, "fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your father, which your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." So it's interesting when you take the bits of information we have about what was going on in Terah's family before they moved from Haran. before they moved from Ur. It seems obvious that there was idolatry in that place. And again, it was God who called them from Ur. And I'm sure in part called them away from that idolatry and that idolatrous type of influence. Stephen, in Acts chapter 7, makes this point. Brothers and fathers, hear me. The God of glory appeared to our father Abram when he was in Mesopotamia, before he lived in Haran, and said to him, go out from your land and from your kindred, and go into a land that I will show you. And then he went out from the land of the Chaldeans and lived in Haran, and after his father died, God removed him from there into the land which you're now living. It was an idolatrous existence over there in Mesopotamia. But I'll tell you, it was advanced in many ways, technologically and otherwise. You remember where Ur was. It was down in the land between the Euphrates and the Tigris on what we call the Persian Gulf. I remember when Judd and I went to British Museum years ago, first time, and I remember seeing this lyre, is what they called it, I guess some type of harp, we would say. Silver-plated, beautifully sculpted, and I remember that on the little card there, it said that this was a lyre from Ur, found in Ur, and it's believed to be dated a couple hundred years before the time of Abraham. Ur was no backwater town. They weren't just sitting around in the mud all day, hoping it didn't rain. These people were rather technologically advanced for their time, and they had quite a civilization. The art of ancient Ur is displayed in a mosaic that's found also in the British Museum. It's called the Standard of Ur. On one side, you have the pictures of peacetime activities. On the other side, of war. But again, these people were people who had quite a sophisticated civilization, especially for that day. But what did God say to Abraham? I want you to leave everything you've known. And I want you to leave your extended family. And I want you to go to a place I'll show you. And by faith he did. That's the passage in Hebrews 11. By faith Abraham, when he was called to go into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed. And he went out not knowing whither he went. By faith he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. Not many people would consider that a trade up. What would motivate a man to do that? The answer is pretty simple, isn't it? What does he say? What does Hebrew writer say is the reason why Abraham would move like that?
He was looking for a better city.
He was. He trusted God. He had faith. The real faith acts. Real faith will obey. There may be a lot of times in our lives when there are going to be decisions we have to make, and it just looks like, well, this is just not going to end well for me. But I know it's the right thing to do. By faith, do what's right. By faith, obey God. By faith, trust Him. It'll work out. I'm going to do the right thing, and I'm going to just trust God. Whatever happens, it'll be the best. That's the faith of Abraham. He looked for a city which had foundations, whose builder and maker is God. So that leads us to chapter 12 and the call of Abraham. In Genesis chapter 12 and beginning in verse 1, now the Lord said to Abram, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and thy name shall be great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curse thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth will be blessed. Reiterating verse 1 and verse 7, the Lord appeared to Abram and said, unto thy seed will I give this land. So you have the three great promises to Abraham, don't you? Actually, more promises than that, if you count them all. But here are the three great promises we talk about, which are what? Land. Going to give you people, going to give you this seed through which all the nations of the earth will be blessed. Somebody made the point. You can really outline the rest of the Bible from those promises, can't you? That's really what we find. God's going to give Abraham a family. That's what Genesis is about. And then he's going to give him the land. That's the conquest of the land. And of course, then all that leading up to, the prophets leading up to that one who would come who would bless the earth. That's the New Testament. God kept every one of those promises. In Exodus chapter 1, what did Pharaoh say about the Israelites? There are too many of these people. Again, when God made this promise to Abraham, how many children did he have? He was 75 years old, didn't have one child. God said, I'm going to make your descendants as numerous as the sand of the sea. Did that happen? It happened. And God said, I'm going to give you a land. How much of that land did Abraham own during his lifetime? Well, he bought a burial place. I guess we count that. How big was that? Probably not as big as this spot we're in tonight for the whole land. But in Joshua 23, Joshua again, some of his last words before he died after his great long service. And now I'm about to go the way of all the earth, and you know in your hearts and souls, all of you, that not one word has failed of all the good things which the Lord your God promised concerning you. All has come to pass for you. Not one of them has failed. But just as all things the Lord has promised concerning you have been fulfilled in you, so the Lord will bring upon you evil things until he has destroyed you from off this good land which the Lord thy God has given you. You will run into many people, especially among the Protestant community, as well as Jewish community, that will tell you God has not yet fulfilled his promises. He absolutely has. Long ago, Joshua was our witness, among others. So the idea that we're somehow still waiting for God to do right by Israel is not true. God gave Abram the descendants that he promised. He gave his descendants that land that he promised. And as far as the promise of the seed, we have the testimony of the Apostle Paul, don't we? In Galatians chapter 3 and verse 16, now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He does not say unto seeds, as of many, but as of one, and to your seed, who is Christ. So, the great promises God made to Abraham. Verse 4 tells us that Abraham departed as the Lord had spoken to him. That's faith. Faith that obeys. Lot went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. He took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls they had gotten in Haran. And they went forth unto the land of Canaan. To the land of Canaan they came. Let me just pause to make this point, and I guess it depends on where you measure the stopping point. But I think, in rough terms, from up to Haran, northwest, is about 600 miles. And from Haran down to Shechem, where they're going, is about 400 miles. That's 1,000 miles. If you took off from right here and you started northeast and you went 1,000 miles, you'd be past New York City. I know that. That's a long way. Abraham did a lot of traveling. And of course, this won't be all of it. He won't just stay there forever, will he? He'll go down to Egypt, then he'll come back. He'll go through the land. So it was quite a journey that God put on him, wasn't it? I want you to go. I want you to leave what you're used to and go. But God knew it was right, knew it was best. And Abraham believed God. Abraham passed through the land unto the place of Shechem, the plain of Moreh, and the Canaanite was in the land. What's the significance of that statement in verse 6 there? And the Canaanite was in the land. Beg pardon? Okay, all right. Yes, sir?
The descendants of Canaan.
That's true, the descendants of Canaan. We read about that, hadn't we? And they were there when Moses brought the people up there, weren't they? But it was not vacant, was it? It wasn't empty. And so again, that's another little factor in this thing. God says to Abraham, this is the land I'm going to give you. What are we going to do with all these people? Well, God will explain all that, won't he? And the Lord appeared unto Abraham and said, unto thy seed will I give this land. And he builded an altar to the Lord who appeared to him. It suggests fellowship. It suggests worship. It suggests that Abraham believed God. He believed what God was saying. So he makes this journey from Ur down there in Mesopotamia up to Haran and then eventually down to Shechem. This is a map of Shechem in modern times between Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. The fellow taking the picture standing on Mount Gerizim, and across the way is Mount Ebal, and in between is the ancient town of Shechem. We'll come back to this, won't we, when we get to the time of Moses. But in chapter 12, verse 8, he didn't stay there, Shechem. He removed from thence unto a mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, having Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar, and he called upon the name of the Lord. Abraham journeyed, going on toward the south. He's continuing to head south. You may, in your Bible, instead of the word toward the south, you may have the word Negev. That's a more literal translation. That's also, the south is the interpretation, but Negev is that region there below, I suppose, the land of Canaan, heading toward Egypt. There was a famine in the land, so Abram went down into Egypt and sojourned there, for the famine was grievous in the land. So, again, we have Abraham making his way down to Egypt. This sounds a lot like what's going to happen in the days of Joseph, doesn't it? We can see several parallels in this. But Abram now is in Egypt, and we read about that story beginning in verse 11. And it came to pass that when he was come near to enter into Egypt, that he said to Sarai his wife, Behold now, I know that thou art a fair, beautiful woman, fair to look upon. Therefore it shall come to pass that when the Egyptians shall say to thee, shall see thee, they shall say, This is his wife, let us kill him, and they'll save you alive. So verse 13, Abraham said, Say, I pray thee, thou art my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake, and that my soul shall live because of thee. What do you make of that? That doesn't sound honest, does it? Had a weak moment, didn't he? Yeah. Doesn't say much for the Egyptians either. By the way, I don't doubt him. We know about kings that will kill some fellow for his wife. See, David. Yes, sir.
When you read about like Abraham and other people, you get to see real life, and you get to see how people reason and how they're in situations. And it's hard for us to really get a handle on it. It's just like the famine. He could have got there and said, God, what are you doing to me? You brought me to a place where now I've got to try. I'm just saying how people are. But it shows how much faith he had. He didn't just say, hey, I'm going back to where I know. And how many people would have done that? And it shows that he was a man of faith. He trusted God. But as Martel said, we have those weak moments, and sometimes we can give in to a situation. And again, we don't know all the details. We have enough to know that he had a weak moment.
Yeah.
But God still didn't just, okay, I'm done with you. There's something about him. And we look at ourselves today. Do we have weak moments? What if God said, okay, I'm done with you? No, he doesn't do that. And if we're the right kind of person, we make correction. We don't give up. We don't head back and go, well, I'm done. It should give us a lot of hope and trust in God.
Yeah. But it's disappointing, though, isn't it? You'd like to think that we all know a half-truth is a whole lie. And, yes, sir.
The scripture doesn't say how long he was there, but I guess, he was a stranger in the land, but somehow he knew how it was going to be when he got there.
Yeah.
Word of mouth, I guess. I don't know how he knew that.
About the Egyptians?
Yes, sir.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm sure he would have maybe heard enough stories about how they operated to know that there was a real danger there. But what we would like to read is, but I know God will see us through this. But he didn't. And as Donald pointed out, I don't either sometimes. And so that is a fair point that he made, that, I'm thankful that God doesn't throw us away when we make a mistake. Abraham was a great man who did the wrong thing. I don't know, again, Donald pointed out, and he's right, there's some things about this story we're not told all the detail. My thinking is, just from what he said to Sarah, was that if somebody has eyes for you and wants to take you, tell them you're my sister. Well, how would that help the situation? Well, it could be that he would be able to negotiate that and say, well, without bringing himself under threat, to just either make the price too high or whatever to get around it. I don't think he ever intended to give his wife away. The problem is, who had eyes for her? Okay, all the plans out the window now. And that's a great lesson for me too. I think, I know this is not right, but I got to get by here and I got to do this. And when Abraham tried that, what happened? He was caught up to the neck, wasn't he? And now what's he going to do? Now Pharaoh's going to come take his wife. And he must have been doing some hard praying at that point. What do I do now? He's from a weak position because he's not done the right thing. If the devil can get me to compromise just a little bit, then he's got me off balance. And he'll be glad to come in there with that other punch and just knock me down to the floor. And that's what he's trying to do here. The princes of Pharaoh saw her and commended her to Pharaoh. And she was taken into Pharaoh's house. And of course, them, they want to give him sheep and oxen and livestock and servants. By the way, one of these Egyptian servants might have been somebody we'll read about later, you think? But God showed mercy on Pharaoh as well as on Abraham. Because what did he do in verse 17? Plague the household. It's the same word that's used for I don't know what plagues they were. He doesn't say, does he? That's the same word over there for the Egyptian plagues in Exodus. But somehow it was obvious that taking Sarai was the cause of all this. And so Pharaoh somehow figured it out. And he said to Abram, what have you done to me? Why didn't you tell me that this was your wife? Why did you say to me, she's my sister? Now the King James reads, I might have taken her to me to wife. Some seem to indicate she had already been taken to wife. But I tend to think that the old translation might be more to the point here. But he says, now therefore take thy wife and go thy way. And Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away, his wife and all that he had. This is the first Exodus, isn't it? Think about that. This family will be asked to leave again here after the plagues, won't they? Many years later, a different circumstance. But it's a rather sad picture. And of course, we also remember in chapter 20, we'll see something very similar to this in another location, won't we? Abraham was a great man. He was not a flawless man. But he was a man whom the devil was looking for a chance to get, and he did on this occasion. God preserved him, saved him, kept it from being so much worse. It, as has been pointed out, it causes me to put myself on guard. Anybody have a question about it? Yes, sir.
Just thinking about, Abraham was spoken to by God, and we may think how great that would be. I would change. God spoke to me or something like that, something.
Yeah.
But you know what? I sort of got a feeling that Abraham would like to have the complete truth.
That's a good point.
He was a man of faith. He's been a remarkable man in this city.
Yes, sir.
The complete truth.
Yeah. I know if I...
It's amazing just how God in control and man is still has the free will.
Very good point.
It has to give you more faith when you think about it.
Yeah. And we realize that, you know, the idea of just hearing the voice of God would cure all the problems. We forget Exodus 19, don't we? We forget Exodus 20. We forget about the folks that saw Peter, who saw the transfiguration and then denied the Lord 3 times. You know, that's not the cure-all, is it? It's glorious, but even great people, if they just are not on guard, they can be knocked over. That's a fact.
He had his advantages. We got ours.
Yes, we do.
We both
We do.
Some of them fall, but God has mercy.
Let him that thinks that he stand take heed lest he fall. That's that. Don't you think about that in all these stories? Yes, sir.
Yeah, when you think about Abraham, and you see him, and you know, sometimes just because he did what God said early on, you jump to the conclusion, you know, he's a man of faith, and he's arrived, he's there. But, you know, when really looking at his life and seeing how it unfolded, he's a work in progress, you know.
Sure.
And his faith at moments can be strong, it can be weak, and that's what we are. We're a work in progress. And sometimes we want to beat ourselves up because we, you know, situation happens, well, I should have done this or should have done that. We need to learn and we need to grow. And we're a work in progress. And you never get to where you totally arrive, where you're just like, hey, I'm there now. You know, but we can look at men like Abraham and see where growth is made. And you know, like when he offered up Isaac, you know, you think, whoa. I mean, you know, and again, it's a work in progress.
Yeah. Genesis 13, we're heading back. Yes, sir. You had a point?
Yeah, I think about all that has been said, and I try to keep fresh on my mind 1 John chapter 1, verse 9, which says, God is faithful and just if we confess our sin. That's where we need to be. We need to beg when we...
So true. So true. After a very unsatisfactory experience in some ways in Egypt, we're heading back north. Although he does come out richer, doesn't he? And that's what he says in chapter 13. Abraham went out of Egypt, and he and his wife, all that he had, Lot with him, back through the Negev, back into the south. Abraham was very rich in cattle and silver and gold. And he went on his journeys from the south even to Bethel, the place where his tent had been at the beginning between Bethel and Ai, unto the place of the altar which he had made there at the first. And Abraham called on the name of the Lord. Abraham's fellowship with God survived what happened in Egypt. His commitment to God survived. Verse 5 notes that Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and had herds and tents. And verse 6 says, the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. Somebody made a point, and I thought it was a really good one. You know, pretty soon in the story, we're going to find that Abraham has 318, wasn't it? Armed servants that grew up in his household. How many folks we're talking about here with Abraham? Well, if we just take a rough estimate, let's say those 318 fellows were all married, and let's say they all had 2 children apiece. That's 1,200 people. You know, so we don't think about just Abraham and a couple of hired hands. We think about quite an operation. And then Lot's got all those folks over there. And the land's occupied already. It's not empty. You can see how that this is a very real practical problem. Yes, sir.
I was going to say, you realize how big that's got to
Yeah.
be. I mean, you know, if you've ever been out to anywhere out west and seen just the size of the ranches and how many cattle you can have on the land and how many people it takes to take care of all that, you realize that there were so many that you could not have enough.
Yeah. Limited resources up there.
You know, the fun thing here, I like to point out, Lot's got a choice to make. And it's not the choice that he thinks he's making. You know, he takes the choice of where he wants to be as far as the land goes. What he's really choosing is, he's choosing between his possessions that he's got and a life near Abraham. blessed by God.
Of course, you know, I think it's Abraham who takes the thing in hand, doesn't he? There was a strife between the herdsmen of Abram's cattle and the herdsmen of Lot's cattle. The Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelt in the land. Then verse 8, Abram said to Lot, let there be no strife, no quarreling, no argument, I pray thee, between me and thee, between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we be brethren. What a great line that is, too, by the way. We're family. We ought not be fighting like this. We ought not have this kind of quarreling going on. We can't stay together. So separation is necessary in this case. It's the only practical solution. Verse 9, is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me, and I will take the left hand. If thou wilt take the left hand, I will take the right. And if thou depart to the right hand, I will go to the left. It is quite magnanimous, isn't it, for Abraham to say, you choose, and I'll take what you don't want. But, as been pointed out, Lot made his choice. He lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. And Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan. And Lot sojourned east, and they separated themselves from the one from the other. Lot dwelt in Canaan, and Abram dwelt in Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain and pitched his tent toward Sodom. Good for Lot, right? What a good deal. I mean, after all, if you're in the cattle business, you want to go where there's water. Smart move. He should never have let me pick first. He knew I was going to pick the best place. I don't know what he was thinking, but he wasn't thinking about the right thing, was he? Because what's the next line tell us in verse 13? They were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. You got a modern translation of 13? Anybody?
The men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord.
Great sinners, yeah, okay. Yes, sir. Did you have a point?
Just say, let's just, skipping ahead a little bit. But the reason I say this being, Lot made this choice. He wound up losing all this stuff anyway.
Oh, yeah.
He wound up losing all of his men, all of his cattle, all of everything. If he didn't, when the kings came to take him away, he did when the land was around Sodom was destroyed.
Yeah, I think
So,
probably both. Yeah.
At some point in time, I look at it and I think he would have been better off just giving up all of his things and staying with Abram.
Yeah.
That's why I say that. It's just, looking at it, making the wrong choice based on the things that you have is worse than giving all those things up.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
What is the significance between it saying in verse 7, at that time the Canaanites and the Perizzites were dwelling in the land, whereas last time when they went through it was just the Canaanites? Is that just a different way of saying it, or does this mean more and more people are moving into the area?
Yeah, it's hard to say, but I've always assumed it to be just simply more detail there. These are powerful groups, and so there were several. Yeah, but I can't be sure about that. You may be right. Maybe the population was growing in that regard. But these folks had been there, some of them a long time, hadn't they? Yeah. So Lot makes his choice, and he's obviously not thinking about the sinful environment. And I tell you why people don't think about the sinful environment, because they think, I can handle it. That's why they think like that. They think, I can handle it. I've tried to preach for years a sermon on Lot, and, if that's what Lot thought, I've made this point before, he was right. What does Peter say about Lot? He was a righteous man who vexed his righteous soul from day to day. Lot never stooped to the wickedness of Sodom and Gomorrah. But you know who couldn't handle it? Everybody else. Everybody else that he loved. He lost them all. He lost some of them in the fire and brimstone. He lost the rest of them after they left the place. You know, Father has to make decisions, not just based on, I can handle it, but based upon, as best he can, with God's help, is this decision, what kind of spiritual outcome is going to come from the decisions that I'm making here? And if he's not leading with that, then Lot's our great warning. Yes, sir.
It's just another one of these things that shows the potential for money, riches, and wealth it can be a great blessing. It was to Abram. But for Lot, it was a great trap. So
Yeah.
think about it. You've got these well-watered plains. There's 5 cities right here. How much money are you going to make breeding your cattle and then selling them to these cities for food? He's set his family set for every generation he can think of thereafter. He's going to be the richest man in the world.
Didn't work that way, did it?
It didn't work that way. The possibilities were endless.
I love verse 14. After all that happens, after they separate, and Lot needs his own existence. He just didn't choose wisely there. It was the choice that affected the rest of his life and the rest of his family's life. But verse 14, and the Lord said unto Abram, after Lot was separated from him, lift up now thine eyes, and look from the place where thou art northward, southward, eastward, westward. He said, all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. So what does God say to Abram when it's all said and done?
It's all yours anyway.
It's all yours. It's all your family's. Verse 16, he reiterates the promise. He does this several times, doesn't he? And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. Rise, walk through the land, the length of it, the breadth of it. I will give it unto thee. And Abram removed his tent and came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, or the oak of Mamre, as most translations say. It was a grove that was well known, a place that maybe you could escape the heat. Mamre was an Ammonite that had worked with Abraham, or would work with Abraham, as we'll see in the next chapters. Hebron. And he built there an altar to the Lord. Again, you know, Abraham, he didn't always make the right decision, but he never gave up on God. And his great example is one that we can learn from. Now, you have a question about 12:13 that you wanted to mention, bring up. Point you wanted to make. Well, it's going to get interesting in chapter 14, isn't it? What I call the Battle of the Kings. I'm sure I'm not the only one that calls it that. In chapter 14, we have a storm brewing. Down there where Lot went to, down in the cities around the Dead Sea, there was a great controversy and rebellion in the air. At some point, those cities had come under the thumb of a great Mesopotamian confederacy. And now they're going to declare their independence. They're not going to pay tribute anymore. It came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, the king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations. These made war with Bera, king of Sodom, with Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, the king of Admah, Shemabir, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. All these were joined together in the vale of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer. In the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, guess what happened? Chedorlaomer's coming to collect the bill. He's coming with the army, with this confederation of kings. And they didn't just attack in the area of Sodom, they took out also others who, I guess, joined this rebellion. The Raphaims in Ashtaroth Karnaim, the Zuzim, they're called here, in Ham, the Emims in Shaveh, in Kerhathim. So these are the Rephaims. These are connected with giant peoples, again, with these imposing individuals. They weren't a match for this confederation, though these Mesopotamians came through and had great success. They smashed them. And then they set their sights down at the Dead Sea on these cities along the sea. And that's where we'll pick up the story, Lord willing, Sunday. And what's Abraham got to do with all this? We'll talk about that, of course, next time. Thank you so much for